So to get a better picture of who I am, we got to take it back to the beginning, and that's going to be with Big Mark and Anita. Yeah, I don't call my parents all the time by mom and dad just because that's our relationship, and that's the way it's got to be sometimes. But I know who they are to me; they know who they are to me, and there's a lot of love, and we've always had a lot of love in that house. Now, going back to when my dad was when he was younger. My grandpa was Portuguese, and my dad was the only son in the house, and my dad was going to be raised, very, very strict. So he started paying rent when he was 12. He moved out when he was 16 on his own, had a car. He says, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to go start working. Now, around that time, he met this amazingly beautiful woman. My dad tells a story. My gosh, she was so beautiful. And he saw her the next day. The next time they went out, they were by the pool. And my dad was like, man, what happened to this chick? She used to be a lot taller. And he's looking at her, and come to find out she didn't have her heels on. So my parents met when my dad was 16 and my mom was 14. And they've been together ever since. They got married. My dad had to get my grandma's permission to get married. And my dad married my mom when she was 16. Now, my dad had been going around the house for quite some time when she was 14, and the moment my dad realized that he needed to marry my mom was he had on a jacket, and it got cold for my mom, so he put the jacket on my mom. And when my mom got home, my dad went back the next day to get the jacket, and he says, hey, what's up, Nita? Where's my jacket? And my mom said, it's not here. He's like, yeah, well, no, but really, where is it? She goes, it's not here. And my mom wanted to protect her family, but at the same time, she didn't know what to say. Imagine living in a house where you have something good, something special, and it's stolen from you. Everything of value is stolen from you. Now, I don't know if I said this the first time around, but let's say, I check if it was recording. I want to do this one by myself. I got my shades on, so I'm not saying that it's bad to cry. I don't want my emotions getting caught up in your emotions. If you hear something that resonates with you, I don't think that me putting what I feel on anybody. So going back to my parents. So my dad, my mom's family, and I didn't mention this the first time, but my mom's family, my grandpa went to war, and I believe it was the Korean War. And when he got back, he had a heroin addiction. As far as I can, the story that I know that I've been told. And when I grew up, my grandpa, he was on from when he got back, he was on heroin for 20 plus years, and that disease spread to my three uncles. The older three uncles, they all got into heroin. I remember sitting outside, later, I'm gonna get back to my parents in a minute, but I remember just sitting outside in the breezeway at my grandma's house, and every blue moon, they'd leave the door unlocked. They'd walk out, stoned as could be, high as a kite, and they would take off for however long. We go in there and investigate. Little kids, kind of not really knowing what's going on in that room, but just knowing that you're not supposed to go in there, so we go in there. And my parents always told me, don't go in that room, my mom especially. And they knew, and they expected that we listen. So it was a very, very rough childhood for my mom. Strong women in that family. I mean, the women in that family are amazing, but every single one of my mom's brothers, my uncle Joe, has been in prison for the majority of his life. He's been in prison for the last probably 20 years. My uncle David, he's a recovering addict. And I don't know if with this type of drug and with our type of with our type of genes in the family, I don't know if that's ever gonna be something that doesn't gnaw at him. He'll take off down to stay with my cousin. But when he comes back, I don't know what's going on with him. I don't have a good relationship with my uncles on my mom's side at all. My uncle Stevie, they said was the most promising, gifted athlete that our family's ever seen. And I know that the Reese side, my mom's side, amazing athletes. And my uncle Steve was one of the best. I believe he played at Edison, played football, maybe about 5'8", maybe 155, 165 pounds. And I mean, just an amazing athlete, but he threw it all away for work and drugs. So he was married. My cousin Roxanne, he adopted her. I mean, amazing. He just I never even thought that he was on drugs when I was young. I was kind of told that there was something a little bit off about my uncles, but I didn't really know what it was. And the older I got, I started realizing, like, man, this is bad. This is real bad. You know, I got like all my uncles. I got two of my mom's, the two youngest brothers are alcoholics, and they even do a lot of meth. And my one uncle, I asked him one day, I said, hey man, what made you start to try meth? And he goes, well, I tried coke when I was younger and I was having a hard time in my relationship, so I just said, fuck it, I'll just try some meth. And it was that type of mentality that I knew that there was going to be something that there was something off in that side of the family, and I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know why they had a propensity for addiction because I was so young. So, I mean, my dad, when he'd go to their houses, he fought all the time. Like he had to defend himself all the time. And my dad wasn't accepted regularly, or readily, I should say, by the family. My dad is a blonde hair, blue eye, white looking dude. He's half Portuguese and half who knows what, half Viking, I would say, because he looks like a Viking. But they never wanted him to marry my mom, and the brothers, they hated him and they didn't want him to be around. So any chance they got, they would try to get him up. And I remember my dad fighting two uncles at a time sometimes. There was a story that, he talks about my Uncle Steve, like I was saying, and Uncle Steve could bang. I mean, he was, like I said, he was an athlete, and he had rocks for hands, and he had a granite chin. And, my grandma's a Native American, and I think my uncle always had that warrior spirit. And I don't think that was ever going to leave him. And I'm big into the spirit world, and I think that he may have been living on borrowed time. But whatever it was, he went out in a way that, if you take the sides away and what it was, I think he went out in the most warrior way that in his mind that he possibly could. Unfortunately, it was fueled with drugs, and I think if he would have taken it to a different venue, he would have had a lot better outcome. But he was married. He had my cousin Roxanne, and he just had my little cousin Marcia. And one day, my uncle worked all the time. He never, like, to what I knew, he never stole anything. He was a hardworking man, and he had an addiction, and it was heroin. And one day he was outside of a liquor store, and the story goes, as I heard it, he was in his car and they contacted him, and that day he didn't want to be arrested. Now, my uncles were known in town as being part of a drug family, because you get a dad and three sons are all dealing in heroin. They get a little bit of a name, and they knew it was him. And my Uncle Stevie loved to fight, a reputation for it. So they were like, oh man, this dude, I don't know if he was passed out in the car, but hey, we better get some backup over here. So my uncle got out of the car, and he had a syringe in his hand, and it was loaded. From what my understanding, it was a speedball, but it was a dose that he probably shouldn't have been taking. And there was about 6 to 8 cops around him, and he wasn't going to be taken. And At first, he was waving the needle around as something that he could use for defense. And finally, he just said, it's time. He shoved it in his arm, ejected it, and it was go time. And it took 8 cops to get him down. And like I said, my Uncle Steve was only 165 pounds, maybe at his best. But, you know, at the time that he was doing a lot of drugs, I don't know how much he weighed, you know, I can't even imagine. But for my dad, who's, you know, as when he was in his prime was 6'3", almost, you know, like I said, 295 pounds. But for my dad to call him a bull, being that size, and call somebody a bull, and says that those were some of his toughest fights that he ever had, were fighting with my Uncle Steve. And there's a reason, because he was a warrior. And that night they got him into custody, and from my recollection is they hogtied him and put him in the back, because he was just irate, like a rabid dog, man, just fighting, just didn't have anything in him to stop. And they got him down to the hospital, and they probably 5150'd him, and they put him in a straitjacket, and he I think he fought and he fought and he fought to get out of that straitjacket, and eventually it just, his heart went out. You know, the combination of drugs and the struggle of being in a straitjacket, and he died, you know. And I look back, and my brother is a cop, and my brother's a great dude, and he was at a training class, and the guy teaching the class was talking about the situation that they had back in the day. And it was like, man, this guy, he was an unbelievable strength, and it was just unbelievable how he was able to take 8 cops at a time, and how this was one of the most dangerous situations they've ever been in. And you know, and the guy, he died, you know, he was on whatever, but he died in the hospital, blah blah blah. And my brother went up to the guy afterwards and said, hey, by any chance you remember that guy's name? And he goes, absolutely. He goes, you know, that's something that I think about, you know. And he goes, was his name Steve Sandoval? And he goes, yeah, man, how do you know? And he goes, that was my uncle. And the guy apologized to my brother. I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry. I wish it didn't happen that way. I just, like, you know, it was just terrible the way it went down. I'm so sorry, Chad. I'm so sorry. My brother looks at him and he goes, man, I mean, what's to be sorry about, man? He made a bad decision and you had to react. That's life. You know, and I miss my uncle, and I wish I would have been able to see him as an older man. But, you know, I got, of the 5 uncles that I got, I don't see none of them. And on my mom's side, and that's just the way it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't get down with that drug life. I don't get down with that, you know, not trying to be anybody. I have a whole bunch of aunties that are amazing. They're just amazing. They come out of that circumstance and to be what they are. They're all married to their first husbands, except my Auntie Mad. She never got married. But to come from what you look at, living in a pigeon coop, my grandma, to now all of a sudden there's all these sisters and they're making something of their lives. They're doing something. They have amazing families. Like, they're very, very spirited people. They're very religious people. But for them to come out of a life where all the older male adults in that house are all strung out on drugs, and heroin's a type of drug that, man, I don't wish that on anybody, especially when people are addicted. Because I rolled up when I was older, and I would see my uncles on, and they wouldn't even recognize me. I mean, it was a pretty sad deal for my mom's family. But when my dad realized at that moment that my mom couldn't keep a jacket at her house without it getting stolen for them to go buy drugs, he said, you know, I got to take her out of this. I can't, but I love this woman, and I'm not gonna, woman, okay, in all intents and purposes. But whatever, we get the picture. Back then, the age of consent was a little bit different, whatever. I love my parents, and I'm glad my parents are young, because my mom is like, both my parents are my best friends. My mom is by far, you know, there's a couple people that can love like her, they can smile like her, they can make people happy like her. Like, she always wants everything to be peaceful and everything love and everything. And you can tell my mom her house is on fire while she is in it, and she will believe it. And it's like, That's the one thing we do about my mom that I love, is she's so hilariously gullible. We tell her things all the time, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, really? Nah, mom, kick back. It's all good. It's all good." And my mom is somebody that gave me my very, and I think both of my grandmas, my grandmas on both sides had a very, very spiritual connection with God, and my grandma being a native, she had a very, very spiritual life, period. So when she really found Jesus and the Lord, she really bit in 100%, and her circumstance was one that she wasn't going to be able to change, because she didn't have the power to help her kids get off drugs. I mean, some people, they that's their whole life. Or they just run away from it. But my grandma was there all the time for them. But my dad couldn't allow her to be in there. All my aunts, they got married and moved out at a young age because they couldn't be in that environment anymore. My youngest aunt, she stayed the longest, but then she was out at a young age. So when you look at this time when my parents met, my dad was in his mind saving my mom from a life that she didn't deserve. Now, my dad, like I said, he was young. He was out when he was 16. And I tell you what, when they got married at 16 and 18, and they had their first kid at 17 and 19, and then I came along at 19 and 21, and they were absolutely babies having kids. But I tell you what, man, there are no parents better than mine. I love them dearly. They did everything that we needed, that they thought they needed to do. When you're 21, having your second kid, that is not a life that many people have ever lived through that I know. Let alone staying married, let alone raising successful, I mean, in the terms of what we're going to call success in my story. But this is something that, growing up in a household like that, that was something that, you know, we had to remain close. That's what kept us moving on. But within a house like that, my dad only knew one way, and he knew the way of the warrior. My brother and I were both raised like Spartans. You know, he used to call us dogs, and that wasn't a term to be, you know, looked at in a bad way. But we were his dogs. You know, Thor's got his hammer and Big Mark had his dogs, and that was me and my brother. And it was one of those things that he did raise us to be able to defend ourselves. Now, there's some pretty badass brothers that I know. You know, I don't know the Gracies, but from what I hear, the Gracies are some badass dudes. And if you don't know the Diaz brothers, you got the Dominguez brothers, and you got the Soares brothers. And when it comes to being raised like gladiators, Big Mark did a pretty damn good job of raising the two of us to be as tough as you could come, and not putting up with any shit from nobody, to be quite honest with you. But within that environment, Big Mark, he was willing to do whatever to impress his sons. He's like, you guys are giving it all out for me, and I'm hard as hell on you guys, but I tell you what, I'm going to be your hero. And there were things that he would do, and I don't know what the hell he was thinking, but I've seen my dad jump out of a tree so high that at a little kid, and a little kids can dream, I'm thinking like, there's no way he should be up that high. I mean, he was over 2 stories up into a tree, and we were living on that ranch, and luckily the dirt was kind of soft, but he went up so high because the neighbor kid that they where we would borrow chickens, he was saying, hey, you know what, my dad could go higher than that. My dad could jump higher than that. My dad could jump higher than that. And finally, my dad is way up in this tree. Like I said, he's probably only about 23 years old, but he's way up in this tree. And then all of a sudden, he's like, nah, I'm not jumping from this side. He climbed down a couple limbs, and then he jumps. And I just remember him hitting the dirt so hard that his ass slammed into his heels through all the dirt. I mean, it was one of the just most bone-crushing sounds you could think of. But he was 23 years old, and he's like, I'm impressing my kids because they're going to remember this forever. I mean, I've seen him spin chickens' heads off. Big Mark is a man's man. Been in so many damn fights. I don't know how many he's won, what his record is, but I tell you what, Big Mark can take a punch. He's got the head the size of a watermelon, but just a loving guy. You know, like I said, my parents are the most amazing parents. we grew up, we didn't grow up poor like my mom, okay? And she didn't grow up poor like her mom. But for the standards, when we were raised pretty damn poor. And me, I just remember, like, I didn't realize that. I never realized it. And I'll tell you when I did realize it, but I never realized it because it was something that was never really shown to me. Now, I started to realize it, not that I was poor, but there was something different about me, because I remember being in kindergarten, first, second grade, and in the second grade, my teacher used to abuse me, and it was physical abuse, it was mental abuse. It was terrible, and I didn't get a second grade education. Let's just say that my second grade year was spent most of the time in the office. I'm saying she'd pull me out of class by my ear, she'd hit me in the head, she'd drag me out by my arm, and I didn't understand why she was being mean to me, because I wasn't that guy. My mom, when she was pregnant, for the first 9 months from conception to birth, all my aunts thought I was a girl. So all the energy and love that they poured into that belly was all female. So like I said, I'm a little bit sensitive. I'm still a little bit sensitive. So when people are mean to me, even to this day, I don't understand why, because I'm just truly trying to just like everything needs to be cool, and that's how it was back then. And I'm sitting there, and it's like there's all this stuff going around in my life, like all this stuff is processing. My dad's fighting my uncles, and that's made me fearful. I had an uncle pull a knife on my dad, and it's just like all this stuff, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, this isn't right. And then I had my first experience with death, and I was like, I didn't understand what death even was that young, and it wasn't necessarily the person had died, but she was dying, and she was living in the house. And I remember being in the hospital bed, and I would go see Tia Lencha, and I would just remember thinking, death is the most scary thing you could possibly be around ever. And my mom would make me go in and say hi. And I would go in and say hi as fast as I could, and then I would escape outside, and I would stay outside. And I wouldn't come back in until it was time to leave, because I was so terrified of what the look of death was. And being sensitive and really being connected to my spirit, and I feel the spirits around me and people. Being an empath, I mean, you connect so much. So when you're a little kid and you don't know how to process that, you're going in there and you're saying hello to someone who is leaving this earth. And there's a lot of stuff going on a realm that it's hard to explain. And it wasn't necessarily the death that scared me. It was everything around it that scared me when I look back on it, So that kind of moment, I mean, these moments, they resonate in us and they stay in us for a long time. And a lot of us don't know how to process this stuff. And this is why, this is part of the reason I'm doing this podcast, because I'm trying to shed light. I'm trying to bring, show people the way into the light. And for me to do that, I gotta show you what this life was, So from there, I was in a school, and like I said, I didn't look like anybody there. I had a hard time making friends. We had the Dominguez boys, that's who we hung out with. And there was me and him, I had Corbell was another friend that I had, but it was a high minority school, and I wasn't looked at as a minority because they saw what my dad looked like. So I was outcasted. I was that kid that was at school that had really bad ADHD that just bounced all over the walls in the classroom. And then when he got outside, nobody wanted to hang with him because he didn't look like them. So I spent a lot of time alone. And when you're in that environment as a little kid and you can't understand why, like, why am I alone? I don't know why nobody likes me at school. And that creates sadness. So I'm living a life right now outside my house of extreme fear and extreme sadness because I'm not accepted. And then we're at my grandma's house one day, and across the street, Simon lived, and we were playing in his front yard, my brother and myself, and we're sitting there, and we're trying to get in this tree. And like I said, we were raised like Spartans, so it was like dog eat dog world. You can't get in the tree, you can't get in the tree. And my brother, he played that big brother role very well. Like, maybe not gonna get it, not gonna get it. And I just remember a very panic energy around me at the time. There was something that was off. And luckily I felt that. And I remember my brother reached down and tried to pull me in the tree, and he couldn't. And then all of a sudden, when I slipped and fell, I felt it, and I looked, and coming from the backyard with the chain on, busted through the chain, is a pit bull, and that pit bull is coming to hunt. And I think I was in the kindergarten, first grade, and I remember the first thing it did, it just jumped up, it went straight for my neck. And it hit me and knocked me to the ground and just started just ripping at my face, trying to get to my neck. I don't know if I had already been getting beat up at the time and I knew to tuck my chin, but something in me told me to tuck my chin, and I put my chin down. And when the dog figured it couldn't get to my neck, he went to my stomach. And I never knew what shock was back then, but I'd always described this feeling. I'm like, man, this is it kind of tickled me. It was weird. I don't understand it. Like, the dog was biting me, but at the same time I couldn't feel it. And he was just shaking me around, and it almost felt like it tickled me. So I don't recall how they got the dog off me. I don't know. I mean, going into shock, I just remember getting in the car, and there's just blood everywhere. And I'm sitting there, and an already scared kid that's, outside his house is getting attacked by a dog, and this thing was out for blood, and blood it got. So I remember being in the hospital, and then I don't remember much until I got back home, and my dad came out to the car to check on me, and he was like, "What's up, son?" And I remember the only thing I could think about is, "Dad, what happened to the dog?" And they killed it. And I remember thinking, "Dad, you guys shouldn't have killed that dog. It wasn't his fault, Dad." And then I found out how they killed it. And back then it was like, you know what? This is my dog, and Simon loved this dog. That was his guy. And my dad had a 2x4, and he was going to get revenge, and Simon was crying, and he said, "Mark, let me do it. It's my dog." And Simon put his dog down that day. I mean, I got a lot of dogs. I love dogs, but whenever a life is taken because of your life, and it was just doing what it's supposed to do, protect. So that was kind of a brutal story, but shit happens. And you know what? I love dogs now. I was terrified of dogs for many years. That was my first experience with PTSD. I tell you what, them motherfuckers are scary as shit. Excuse my language, but man, I got bit by a few dogs after that too. They didn't attack me, but they bit me and snipped at me because they saw the fear there. So I'm dealing with a sort of a PTSD type of thing. I'm dealing with sadness because, I don't fit in. I got this fear, there's always family members like trying to fight my dad. And, I got this, like, there's just a lot of stuff going on for a little Sean at the time, you know what I mean? So I'm like, all right, and I don't fit in at school. So all I got is my family. You know what I'm saying? I got my older brother who eventually loved whooping my ass, and that was something. Being a Spartan, you just take it. But I'm a sensitive dude, so I'm sitting here getting my ass whooped, and I'm like, all right, I don't want to fight, but all right, I guess I have to defend myself. But even then, through second grade, I never really realized. I just didn't realize what was going on yet, because we all looked the same. At least I thought. I'm like, I didn't realize why people didn't like me. I didn't know it was because I didn't look like them. I didn't understand that. You know what I mean? I don't look like anybody. But when I really, I'm sitting there and I'm just like, this is a brutal way to be, right? So, and again, my family life was amazing. I remember, funny story is funny too, and just to bring up my ADHD is like, anybody could be talking and I could be hearing Charlie Brown's teacher straight up, not have any clue what's going on. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, do this, huh? Okay, I'll do what I think you're telling me. So one day we were playing baseball at Norseman, right? And we're sitting there and there's a hole, like a worn out dirt spot in the grass, this first base, right? But like I said, I could have watched baseball games, not paying attention. I'm just like completely just in Sean's own little world. And I'm getting hit with the funny story right here. So, because the last one's kind of brutal and then the next one's even worse. But he goes, run to that hole. I was like, huh? What? To that hole? All right, cool. So I hit the ball and I take off running. And I bypass first base, so Pop's thinking, like, he tells me later, I was thinking, man, he just overran the base. And I was running as fast as I could. And I look off in the distance, and I ran, and I got to the hole, and I sat down on the concrete. And mind you, this is probably, 250 feet away, maybe 300 feet away. But I sprinted as fast as I could. And the hole that I was thinking about, because my mind sometimes when it registers a certain way. I didn't see the little dirt patch that was in the grass. I saw the hole that was by the bathroom that was in the concrete. That was the drainage to come out. So I took off running down there, and both of my dad and brother just laughing on the ground. They're yelling at me. I'm tired because I wasn't in shape at the time. And I sit down and I'm just exhausted. And I look back and they're laughing at me like, Sean, dude, what are you doing? I walk back and they're like, this dirt hole right here. But it was, little things like that when you first learn out, trying to catch the baseball like this. Big Mark throws it to me and just hits me in the face. And instead of saying like, I just remember him saying like, yeah, you won't do that again. Like, yep, apparently, like, cause you don't catch like this. Sean, turn your hand around. So there was things like that happened in my house that was like, you're going to learn, and I'm not going to necessarily just spoon feed you. You're going to learn, and you're going to learn the hard way. And Big Mark didn't know about nothing going on at school. He was a young parent working, trying to pay bills and feed his family. He'd give a care less if something was happening at school. If I didn't have any friends at school, so what? You got your brother. Oh, he was so young that when the teacher was abusing me, he said, "Hey man, why can't this lady be fired? He shouldn't be doing this. She shouldn't be doing this." Big lady, she had a perm polyester suit all the time. Like, I'm telling you, she had a bad hip, so she limped around, and she probably was at the time 60 years old. And to me, she looked way older than that. But I'm saying, Big Mark would go into the class, and they said, well, she's got tenure. And in his mind, well, shoot, she's been there for 10 years. They're not getting her out. So it was one of those things that it was just a very, very just off outside my house. It was things, something wasn't right about me. Something wasn't right about the world. I just didn't belong in this world. And then one of the worst stories of my life happens, and it happens in the second grade. And we're at the school, me and my brother, just playing because we live right across the school, and all of a sudden some junior high kids roll up on their bicycles. And immediately, little scared Sean gets scared. Because I just thought everyone was out to get me. Because of, I'm like, why are they fighting my dad for no reason? Like, why is this stuff, why did this dog come to get me? Like, something's out to get me. It's going to be somebody, it's going to be something, but there's going to be something that's going to get me. And these little fuckers, they started harassing us, and one spit on me. And at the time I was just so scared. I didn't know what to say, so I was like, just try to just make it go away. Just say something to just be like, it's cool, just make it go away. And I said, oh, it's cool. I like being spit on. But what I meant was just like, please leave me alone. I don't want to deal with this. And they fucking rode around me for like 10 minutes while my brother got my dad. And they fucking spat on me. For like 10 minutes. And I just sat there. The whole time. I don't remember if there was like 7 to 10 of them. There could have been 3 or 4 for all that it mattered. It wasn't escaping the circle. And when I tried, they pushed me back to the middle. And until my brother was able to get my dad and come back, he spit on me. I tell you what, Big Mark, my motherfucking superhero came, and he was pissed. And I don't know, like, I got daughters and shit, but I'll beat the shit out of a 7th or 8th grade. I don't care. If they were doing that to my kid, I don't have it in me to not. You know, and like, you know, my friends get mad because I'm like, why are you so hard on the kids? And just like, I've been harder on my kids and when they were friggin' 4 and 5 than I'm on most people. So you better believe that if somebody is spitting on my kid, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna whoop some ass and I'm gonna hope to get some knocks on my door. And that's straight up. And I'm a justice warrior. I hate injustice. I hate people being mean to people, because it's uncalled for, you know what I'm saying? So I do have a lot of pain in my heart. Even to this day, as you can tell, as my voice is cracking on something that happened when I was 6 years old. It leaves scars. But, you know, when Big Mark came, and he was like, hey, basically to the effect that I could remember, but it's another thing you kind of block out, that, hey, if I see you guys around here again, messing with my boys, I'm going to find where each one of you live, and I'm going to come hunt your papas down. And I never, when I did see some of these dudes, they just looked at me and then looked the other way. And Big Mark was there the whole time, and I never realized the imposing figure that he was. But he was, and he was always in my corner. So Big Mark knew we weren't gonna live in this environment much longer. So 3rd grade hit, and I don't know what he was thinking, but he took us from a poor ass school to, and again, I didn't fit in there already, and then he takes us now, and this is predominantly like Black, Asian, Hispanic, right? And then he moves, oh man, Clovis West seems like a good school. Let's send him there. So he buys a house, which was pretty badass, brand new house. I'm like, I gotta live in a brand new house. The only brand new house I've ever lived in. And at that time, I was supposed to go to Pinedale, which was gonna be Mountain View. So 3rd grade, I was supposed to go to Pinedale. But they were holding Mountain View school at Pinedale for that year as like overflow. So instead of doing that, 'cause my dad's like, I just took him out the hood. I'm gonna put him over here at Valley Oak. Now Valley Oak was a brand new school. Now you can imagine a brand new school, and those of you that don't know Valley Oak was like the richest school in the district at the time. Predominantly white. And here I go again. Like, I had friends there, and then I go like at least I had like one friend there that you know, well, 2, John and Jeremy, and then there was some other outlier friends, but I didn't really have anybody that were really like friends. And then I get here and I have a teacher who's pregnant. So I remember thinking, like, the start of the year, because like I said, we were poor. We always ate. And when I mean poor, I mean money. I don't mean in family, because we were rich in family, but I mean poor as in money wise. My mom always had food on the table. whether it be beans and rice and a little piece of meat, hot dogs, whatever. Spam, I love Spam still to this day, love Spam. But we didn't have any money like these kids had. And I remember the first day of school, and we just had like Pro Wings. I don't know if y'all remember Pro Wings, but they were some of the cheapest shoes ever. I mean, I think I'd probably rock them now just to pay homage to them. But the ones that I had, they were the only thing we could afford. So we got our nice little clothes to start the school year, and I just remember I would look at kids because nobody really wanted to hang out with me, and I would look at kids and I'd be like, man, halfway through the year, I'm like, why do they still look the same? I know everyone in my old school, we started to change appearance, but these kids are all looking the same. And I didn't realize why. And then some kid decided to come up to me and point it out. Be like, man, you're poor. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what that means. Like, all right, cool. That's like cool. And he's like, man, how come you don't have new shoes? Or how come you have holes in your pants? Man, how come you wore those yesterday? How come this? How come that? And at that point, I realized, like, uh-oh, it's happening again. Like, these kids are mean. They're being mean to me again. And I never understood it. And I'm sitting there and I'm just this kid that's scared. I don't belong again. At this time, Chad decided to start beating me up. Big Mark works all the time. My mom was working at the time. And there I was, different again. Different again. So now that I don't get along with anybody at the school and I rarely have friends that go to the school, my teacher, like I said, was pregnant. And she went out on maternity leave. And now, I mentioned before, but I had a serious case of ADHD at the time. Now, Big Mark was always whooping my ass to make sure I stayed in line. And if he didn't, I don't know what would have happened. I probably would have ended up in prison, because I'll go over those statistics after I say this last part. I'll say it now. Kids that miss 1 year of prison, there's a certain percentage, and I'm not going to start spouting off numbers right now because I'm not in that mindset, but you miss 1 year of school, your likelihood of going to prison is going to be pretty high. And during second grade, I missed second grade. I missed it. And these are all during the years where you learn like your basic reading skills, like all your stuff that you need to, like, the foundation is second, third grade. Second grade, I was getting beat up by my teacher, and I didn't feel safe, and I was scared, attacked by this dog. I'm fearful. Every day I go to school, I'm fearful, and I got ADHD, and I'm just like, I'm a whack job, right? So, I mean, maybe the teacher was in her right to hit me. But I got to third grade and thought it was going to be different. So when my teacher was around, things were good. And then she left, and the substitutes couldn't handle me. So I remember for the last half of the year, they just put me in the back of the class. And the only two friends that I had were a kid that didn't even speak any. He didn't even speak English. He was from Mexico. And another kid that didn't speak English, and he was Hmong. And they were just fresh in the country. And they put the three of us back there and just let us be for a whole half of the year. I can't remember the first half of the year because of the ADHD, but the second half of the year, I just remember doing nothing. And that's the second year that I missed. And go look up those statistics for people that should be in prison. But all that was about to change, because I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. And I tell you what, there's certain things that I'll die for, but I'll never be a victim again. And there was something that started that very next year that was going to change my life forever. But we'll talk about that next time.